Welcome to the Galactic Core Podcast. Here to review the latest films and TV shows from all your favorite intergalactic universes. Now, it's time to get your geek on. Please welcome your host, the prophesized chosen one. It's Andy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Galactic Core Podcast. I had a bit of a break last week because the week before I dropped 2 episodes in the space of a week for you, so I thought I'd give myself a little break and come back. And now that all the Marvel stuff is over and done with, for the most part for this year, it's time to focus on a few different things over the next coming months. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reviewing pretty much all of Star Wars. So every film, every TV project, might be some other bits and pieces that I do from it. That's going to be scattered over the next few months, along with a few other bits and pieces to do with Marvel and different characters from various different things as well. And obviously, tune into my social media to find out what's going to be coming up and when things are going to be dropping. But today we're kicking it off with a Star Wars review. So we're going to be starting at the very beginning of the whole franchise, and of course, I had to bring in an expert for this. He's going to be doing all 3 of the prequel films with me. We're not doing all 3 today. We're only going to be doing Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. But he's very kindly agreed to cover all 3 films of the prequels with me, and so those will be coming up over the next few months. But please welcome to the show an amazing YouTuber. He's just launched his podcast as well, so be keeping an eye out for that. He's been on the show before, and he's a friend of the show, so please welcome back Clan Brandolorian. How you doing, bud?
Beautiful, man. Another good day. A little cold outside, but we're staying warm inside, so no problems on the inside.
Absolutely, yeah. How's things been going? Obviously, I mentioned that you obviously just launched your own podcast on the back of your YouTube channel. Tell us a little bit about that. What you're going to be talking about on there? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I was doing a little short podcast. I was kind of trying to do the opposite of longer podcasts, especially with TikTok being the huge platform today, and it's all short videos, and some people get bored even with a 30-second video. So I was kind of thinking, kind of a podcast realm, 10 to 15 minutes, but I kind of actually got bored with it. It's not enough time to really talk about anything. So I have on a good friend of mine, Bailey. He's a pretty big Star Wars fan. We've been good friends for 2 years, so decided to launch it with him. And then we also expect to have guests on as well, actually starting here in the next couple episodes that we have mapped out. And but yeah, pretty much everything Star Wars, of course. We kind of tie in other movies and, how they can kind of build plots into future Star Wars films. But pretty much just the things we like about it and kind of trying to guess what the future content of Star Wars can bring us ultimately.
Nice. I like it. I'm definitely going to be tuning in myself, so everyone else make sure you're tuning in as well. Otherwise, I will come and slap you all silly for not doing so, because it's going to be good content. So we are here to chat, obviously, all things Star Wars for the prequels, and we're going to be starting off with Episode 1. Before we get there, though, we've got a few other things that we're going to chat about in terms of Star Wars. So first of all, I would like you to everyone can see behind you. You've got a lot of Star Wars Pop Funkos as much as a few other bits and pieces behind you.
Yes.
In terms of Pop Funkos, I only really go for Vader or Anakin ones. I've got part of my this side, part of my Anakin and Vader focus over here on the bottom few shelves. We can't quite see them, but in terms of all those pops and stuff you got behind you, pick us out a favorite and just tell us why you love it so much.
Man, I'm trying to get my Vader side up too. I actually just got my second Vader Funko,
Nice.
and it's the cracked mask Vader, and that one is long awaited. That's definitely up in the top 3. But if I have to pick a favorite, it's going to be my Chase Cobb Vanth. It's him in Boba's armor, but without the helmet on, just showing the sexy gray hair, just the silver fox of the galaxy.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's probably my favorite because I loved seeing him in Mandalorian season 2, episode 1. And I thought that kicked off the, best season of Mandalorian, in my opinion. And it was just a great episode. And I love the character of Cobb Vanth, and I hope we get more of him. But I was actually on the chase for like months to find him. In a local shop at our shopping mall here, I found him, but he was actually hiding behind Cobb Vance with the helmet on. So I had to look way back and found him, and I spent that $12 as quick as I could. But he's probably my favorite for sure.
Because we do exchange a picture every now and then, don't we, of when we see pops coming up, or like, oh, have you seen this one yet, don't we? So
Man,
I wanted to mention that upcoming one that I sent you. It's like a movie moment one of Captain Rex and Pong Krell from the Clone Wars episodes. If anyone knows, obviously, much about Pong Krell, then he was obviously a Jedi that had turned to the dark side and just killed off a bunch of clone troopers for the sake of it. Horrible bastard, one of the most hated villains, I think, in all of Star Wars, if anyone knows the Clone Wars and has seen a lot of it. I'm super excited for that Pop Funko. Have you seen it around yet? Because I think it might be exclusive for you guys over there.
yeah. So when you sent it to me, I didn't even know it was just for United States. So kind of going into that, I'm hoping that it comes out soon. I do know it's a GameStop exclusive, and I do have one in my hometown. But I think there's still some slots for pre-order. So whenever I find them, I will grab two. So don't you worry.
Yeah, I always get gutted because it seems to think that Hasbro and other companies that make figures and stuff like that seem to hate the UK, even though we're a huge collector's base. I swear to God that like they give us virtually no supply of anything, and the Americans. I sometimes see it in some of my collecting groups that in America they have like bargain bins full of figures that have been put down to like $2 or $3, and over here we can't even get hold of them. It just makes me want to cry a little bit. So I was like, when I saw that was a GameStop exclusive, I was straight on the old messages to you, like, if you get one, I'm happy to pay. Send it over here.
Yeah, man. Because even the Captain Rex by himself is insane. You can't even find it anywhere. But him to be in a 2-pack is really cool. I think they're starting to implement a lot on the 2-packs nowadays. So that's really cool.
I'm sure I saw in one of my Funko groups that someone put a Captain Rex up for sale the other day, and it was like nearly £400. And I was like, yeah, don't have the money to pay for that, unfortunately. Like, I'm pretty sure that like the original 501st Clone Trooper they do goes for about $1,500, which is absolutely ridiculous. The little bit of plastic. So, but you know, one day maybe. When I've won the lottery and don't have to worry about such things, it might come my way. But let's chat a bit more Star Wars then. So I know we chatted a little bit about it because you came on and did episode 1 and 2 of Ahsoka with me. Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate how great of a guest you are, that is my all-time most listened and watched episode since I've been doing this podcast. Admittedly, I've only been doing it about 7 months or so. So it's not like I've been going for hundreds of episodes, but again, just the quality of content that we get from yourself mixed in there with obviously the quality that I'm delivering as well is puts it up there. You know, my most listened and watched episode ever. So I'm really looking forward to discussing a bit more Star Wars with you. So in terms of what it is that we love about Star Wars, especially let's try and keep it maybe to the prequels, because you know the originals are what draws us into Star Wars. I think the prequels is something that keeps the love going. Maybe the less we mention right now about the sequels, but potentially the better. But in terms of then the prequels, what is it about the prequels that you love so much? Because I know you are a big prequels fan.
Yeah, especially, you know, people around our age, like it's going to be the prequels that stick out. You know, it's what we grew up to. You know, like my dad was a huge original trilogy fan, but his confusion was, why is it 4, 5, and 6? Like, where's 1, 2, and 3? And, you know, and from what I know, I was only 2 years old when the Phantom Menace came out, but that was my first cinema movie. Like the first time I ever went to a theater, and it was for a Phantom Menace. I don't remember it, but I remember it being the first Star Wars I watched. I remember we had the VHS tape, and we got Attack of the Clones later. And then once Revenge of the Sith came out, pretty much everything was DVD. So we went ahead and got all of the original trilogy in a box set, and then we got the prequels in a box set. And man, I just remember watching those just endless, like time and time again. And especially today, we're talking about, you know, Phantom Menace, and, you know, just seeing Maul for the first time, it's scary. It's kind of like, who is this guy? But then he lights one side of the lightsaber, and then the other side lights up. And I just think that's just beautiful on George's end, especially with the writing, because we had already seen him, you know, attack Qui-Gon when they're running back to Padme's ship, and he only had one side lit up. So at that point, maybe it's just a normal lightsaber, but then later, it's just the little things like that and just create such a big impact, especially for prequel fans, because that's one hell of a character, Maul.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in agreement with you in the fact that I'm a little bit older than you, to be fair. If you're only 2 when episode 1 came out, I was, bloody hell, what was I? 1999, wasn't it? So I was like 15 at the time. I actually was on holiday in America when it came out. So I remember like asking my mum if like my stepdad could take me to go and watch it in the cinema. And that was back in the day when films in America used to come out anything from like 3 to 6 months before the UK. In the olden days of the late 90s. So I remember going to see it, getting loads of toys from it, coming home to the UK, wanting so desperately to talk to my friends about it, and then not being allowed to because they all pretty much were like, if you tell us and spoil anything, we will beat you senseless. So I had to keep all these toys hidden from them, couldn't talk to them about it for like a good 3 or 4 months. And then when it came out, I was like, yes, finally, I can discuss it with them all. Because it was before chat rooms and all that sort of stuff. So I had like no one to chat about it with because I'd seen it when I was on holiday. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was still the fact that, these are the films that I got to see sort of growing up in, late 90s, early 2000s. And for me, it was so impactful because obviously I got to see the original trilogy, not when they came out. I was, but I remember going to, I think they had a rerunning of one of the original films when I was about 6 or 7, and I got taken along to that, and that's where it sort of kicks in for me from there, and getting into Star Wars, and then seeing a new sort of series of films come out was absolutely immense, wasn't it? And so love of Star Wars always starts for a young age, and obviously has drawn us in. And I know a lot of people will bash on the Disney era, but at the same point, the amount of Star Wars we've had since 2014. 2015, I never thought we were going to get this much. I mean, we had to wait less time from when Revenge of the Sith ended to when we started getting that. It was like, 10 years, 9 years? And people obviously had to wait from 1983 to 99. They had to wait 16 years to get more real Star Wars anyway. But I'm never going to bash Disney. Yeah, could some quality of things be better? Absolutely. But you can say that about almost anything. Was everything of the original trilogy or the prequels great? No, there's definitely some flaws in there and things that need improving on. The same can be said for obviously, the Disney era of Star Wars. But at the same point, I'm always going to love it because we've got more content than ever, and I'm never going to get tired of it. People want to talk about potential superhero fatigue with Marvel and DC and all that kind of thing, and maybe sci-fi in general, but I'm never going to get tired of it, and I'm going to like drink in every bit of Star Wars that comes our way. But speaking of which, and then in terms of favorite characters in Star Wars, I'm not asking you for like all-time favorite, but just maybe some of the unsung heroes that really stick out for you in terms of, when they pop up on screen, you get excited because not everyone else might love them. Have you got any like that?
Yeah, the little time we get with Kit Fisto, I love that character, and I was really glad we got to see him in like the 2D Clone Wars and got to see him underwater using the lightsaber. That was like a huge question for many years. Like, could that, possibly happen, or what would happen if the blade touches water? So Kit Fisto was a character to bring that to light. And, he's happy. He's always a happy guy. He's smiling. And I love the compare and contrast from Kit Fisto and Attack of the Clones to Kit Fisto and Revenge of the Sith. It's just completely different looking. And it's like, he's seen some things during the Clone Wars. So... But Kit Fisto for sure, and then kind of my my low key character is Quinlan Vos. I love that.
Nice.
We get to see him for the first time in the Phantom Menace for about like 1.2 seconds. When Anakin and Sebulba have their little thing, and the Dark Disciple book does a lot of justice for his character. And of course, this one episode in the Clone Wars that was really cool. Just to see him operate with Obi-Wan and actually showing that Qui-Gon was actually kind of the rebel of the Jedi Order. So that's why he was never in the movies, because he was off doing other things, which is really cool. That's a good explanation, but hopefully we can see him more. They mentioned him in Kenobi, so I'm hoping we get to see him.
Yeah, it's confirmed really that he's still out there. We don't know his fate, so to speak. I think I can't remember if it was Legends or written in, or it was like maybe a deleted scene from episode 3 that he was supposedly on Kashyyyk on the other
Yes.
side of the planet during Order 66 and was killed during that, like so many of the Jedi. And then obviously, but that's a deleted scene, so it never came to canon, and they've obviously continued his story on, which is great.
Yes.
You mentioned the Dark Disciple book as well, which is a fantastic story, to be fair. Him falling to the dark side, falling in love with Asajj Ventress, and then pulling himself out of it essentially at the same point. So anyone who's not read that book, I think it's definitely worth a read. It's
Oh
definitely
yeah.
got that great underrated character. I like those choices a lot. I do love Kit Fister when we see him in episode 2, very briefly, when he's like force pushing the C-3PO droid over, and he's like got a big smile on his face about it, and he sort of continued that energy into the Clone Wars series a little bit. There's like joyful guys, like, hey, I'm just doing my thing.
Yeah, it's good. Some comedic relief, especially during the Clone Wars, because that was obviously a very up and down, sideways kind of time. So yeah, gotta love him.
And then in terms of, is there anyone from the prequels that you really don't like and just think is overrated?
Hmm.
I don't know if overrated is the right word to use, but is there anyone that just maybe sticks out and you just go, I don't get why other people maybe like this character as much?
At first, like way at first, now, I've seen the prequels a million times now, and I can kind of look back at characters. When you kind of look at how Padme had a decoy the entire first movie until, it came out that she was the queen, actually. I didn't really, when you kind of look at it, it's like, what's Padme, like, why is she here right now? Especially like on Tatooine. But then, of course, why, she's the queen of Naboo. So at first they portray it that she's the decoy. She's not really the queen. So Padme's character could be kind of iffy at first, but obviously she turns into a huge character and things wouldn't happen if it wasn't for her. So, and when I was a kid, I liked Jar Jar, but I just thought he was just kind of the overly comedic relief. But now that I'm older, I like his character, and a lot of things would happen if there wasn't Jar Jar as well. And I love I love the arc they give him in Clone Wars as well, the animated series, because even more things, especially with the Senate and the Republic, things would be polar opposite, by the events of Revenge of the Sith, if, Jar Jar wasn't, kind of in control of some things.
I do like that episode in Clone Wars where they almost play into that fan theory of him being Darth Jar Jar, where they sort of like let him be almost like, oh, everyone thinks he's the Jedi that's running around, and it's just clumsy Jar Jar doing his thing, but he's also doing good in terms of like trying to get Padme out. But yeah, it was just, I thought that was a great nod to maybe that theory that he's really someone behind the scenes who's just making himself look clumsy and stupid, and really he's a secret mastermind behind everything.
Yeah.
Do you ever want that to be a true thing for him?
Yeah, let it happen. Maybe if we're gonna get some Legends content like to come to life, like there's a lot of people want a Star Wars What If series, and
absolutely.
I think
I would.
That would be pretty cool, and show, because Jar Jar went through it all. He was one underneath Boss Nass, never really gave Jar Jar the light of day to even try to be good. As like a Gungan, I was gonna say as a human, but I think that would be cool if he kind of went off and kind of like Maul was just kind of pushed underneath, and when he got his opportunity to do his own thing, he actually succeeded for a while. But I think Jar Jar having an arc like that would be cool, like in a Legends What If.
God, I would kill for a What If series. I love the Marvel What If series. And I've seen so many videos on TikTok and other places where people have said, like, what episodes can we do? And it's always the obvious ones, what if Ahsoka didn't leave the Jedi Order, or what if Anakin beat Kenobi, or what if Anakin never turned, sort of thing. But I want to see those little alternative stories just to see how things will play out, because people, in a way, treat Visions as kind of like a what if.
Oh yeah,
sort of thing, in terms of like, if this was an alternate universe, what would it go with? But I'm like, no, you want to see the characters we know and love, and having an alternative storyline there. So yeah, Maybe one day if we're very lucky.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's something they're planning, but maybe one day if we're so lucky. Okay, so one thing we are going to be covering during the 3 episodes that we're going to be doing as well is I've asked you to come up with your top 3 all-time Star Wars projects. So whether that's films, TVs, novels, comics, anything Star Wars. And we're going to reveal each one on your list as we're going through these episodes. So we're going to start now with your 3rd favorite all-time Star Wars project. Hit us with it. What have you got?
It's going to be The Mandalorian. So when I kind of look at a list, it's especially with all of Star Wars, like you mentioned earlier, with Disney, giving us a lot more content, we're able to, make more of a larger list. It's not just the 6 movies anymore. So I really like what Disney let Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni envision as a cult of a show, like The Mandalorian. It's Boba Fett was one of the most, largely loved characters, and he didn't really have that much screen time in the original trilogy, and his armor looks so cool, and we actually get to see that in another character and then deep dive into the the family and the lone wolf and cub aspect of The Mandalorian with Grogu. So I think some of the best episodes, some of the best screenplay, best acting, and it's such an emotional roller coaster up and down through all the good things. And the writing is just beautiful. The cinematography is literally out of this world. And we just get to deep dive into, new characters like Grogu and Din Djarin, and Bo-Katan's legacy is continuing. And I feel like it's good for, the average Star Wars fan, even to a really nerdy Star Wars fan, seeing some of these Clone Wars characters being brought back into live action for the first time. Like Ahsoka's first appearance was in The Mandalorian. Boba Fett survived since 1983, and he's, in The Mandalorian. And got a character of Yoda species again. It's not just Yoda and Yaddle. We have Grogu now, and like so much untold story left, and it could go on for 90 more years. I feel like this story between the two.
Nice. That's a really good choice. I've highly enjoyed the Mandalorian series since it's come out. It has become one of my favourites, to be fair. And we all know that the Mandoverse different series are all going to culminate in Dave Filoni's what's been dubbed the Heir to the Empire film. So, but the way that the last Mandalorian series finished, where the other Mandalorians of Bo-Katan were sort of claiming back Mandalore. They defeated sort of Moff Gideon and his Imperial sect. Mando and Grogu seem to be happy, just chilling on their little plot of land, with Grief Karga, obviously overseeing the town that they're in. And theoretically, you could leave the series where it is, and it would have been a satisfying ending. But we obviously know they're going to be coming back. What do you want to see from the future of the Mandalorian series?
Well, like you said, I think they ended in a good spot. We do know that Carson Teva is going to let Din Djarin and Grogu kind of do some New Republic underlying work, which is going to be really cool. I think that's when we're going to get some a lot more of Zeb. I think they're going to cross paths a lot more. But if there's some things I really want to see, I want to see what Luke does as well, because he's been a big character, especially in the Mandoverse, and I think this is where his time with a young Ben Solo can come into tact. Maybe Jason Syndulla can go ahead and be a student at Luke's academy, just kind of as a side story during the Mandalorian Mandoverse. But I would love to see Din Djarin and Grogu obviously doing more bounty hunting type activity. And of course, I'm ready for Grogu to start speaking. I want to know what his voice sounds like, and I want to know why they picked this certain voice once we first hear him start talking. And I just think it would make the story just, smooth out even more if Grogu's able to talk and we're not just going off of his his whines and his, body language. But I think Din Djarin is a really good leader, and I think what's to come with Grogu, especially growing up with being force sensitive and being trained under the ways of the Mandalorians. I think this is just I don't think there can be anything better. I think he's going to be the next Tar Vizsla, perhaps. And one thing I really, really want is for either Bo-Katan, Din, or Grogu to have taken the Darksaber when it was destroyed. And Grogu forges the crystal inside and makes kind of like a Darksaber 2.0, but it's for Grogu.
Mm.
I think that would be really, really cool. That'd be something I'd really want to see.
Nice. And 2 questions for you then on Mandu and Grogu moving forward within the Star Wars universe. First and foremost, do you see it ever a possibility that Din Djarin would be killed off in Dave Filoni's film? As like a sacrifice play, for example.
And that's the thing, is we know someone's going. And
I'd betting Ahsoka personally, but
man, that would, if this is going to be Dave's big movie, like his, first movie, and it's going to go out with a bang, Ahsoka going off would kind of be the nail in the coffin, for the movie. It would bring so much emotion, so much weight. But I could see Din or even Boba Fett. What's Boba Fett taking over Jabba and Bib Fortuna's spot on Tatooine. I feel like that's just kind of like a dead end. Like he's already doing that. But Din Djarin, how many close calls has he had?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes he loses like a mud horn. Like, come on, dude. But things happen. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. But I could see Din going out, Boba Fett. Ahsoka's another good one. I haven't really thought about that. Maybe even Bo-Katan. But we do know Grogu's not going out.
And that was going to be the second question, which I will get to in a moment. It's just the reason I say Ahsoka is because this film is going to be like everyone versus Thrawn, essentially, and the Shadow Council that we saw in Mando season 3. And I proposed that it's going to be that thing that they need to come a point where they need to show Thrawn's brutalness and his strength in being a leader for the remnants of the Empire at this point. And to do that, no better way than to kill off a couple of people. So I did have potentially that Boba Fett would be someone that would fall to that fate, because, like I said, I think his story now is coming to maybe a bit of an end, and he would be a prime candidate for that. Possibly Din Djarin in a sacrifice move to protect Grogu. And the reason I said Ahsoka is because essentially Thrawn is going to need to be defeated in this film, because this is where the Empire remnants finally get killed off, to me, and where the First Order then rises to take their place.
Yep.
And if you're going to wrap up the story, of 3 or 4 different series in one go, then the one that's going to be there to save everyone surely would be Ahsoka. It's Dave's character anyway, and her giving that sacrifice play to be the martyr for everyone seems to be me the most logical way to do it. In the same way that at the end of Rebels, Ezra made the sacrifice to take Thrawn away from everyone and protect them, I could see Ahsoka being the one here that sacrifices herself to kill Thrawn and everyone else and give them that chance. So that's why I pinned her down as being the one to do it. And like you said, it would be hella emotional to have any of those characters killed off in this film. But I think it does have to happen.
It has to. You're right.
Yeah. So my second question then about Grogu is the Rey Palpatine / Skywalker, whatever you want to call her, film that's going to be coming out with obviously Daisy Ridley returning, that's set 15 years after the events of the sequel trilogy, where she's going to be setting up a new Jedi Order and teaching the next generation of younglings. Do you see Grogu having a part in this film to play as maybe someone that's at the new Jedi Temple with her? We know he can live that long, so
yeah, he'll be alive for sure. I know a lot of people are gonna just go into the Rey movie like this. There's no way this is gonna be good. It's bound to happen, but I think Rey's character can have some justice. I think Daisy Ridley is gonna follow the paths of Ahmad Best and Hayden Christensen on getting their kind of get back.
yeah.
I think I'm not even really sure who's directing the Rey movies, but they're obviously going to have a lot on their shoulders, and that's actually, I think, going to be a good thing to help this movie or this trilogy be great, is looking back at the sequels and just even getting on Twitter and typing in sequel trilogy. You can get so much feedback, from fans, and kind of paint the picture that you want. But I could see Grogu definitely being with her. I want to see Finn as a Jedi Knight, maybe kind of learning his ways. I think that character needs justice as well, which that could just be resolved right there. But I really want to see, Grogu with Rey kind of as a Tar Vizsla 2.0. I think that would be really awesome. And they could learn a lot from each other, even because, Luke showed Grogu a lot, and he showed that in Mando season 3. He's doing flips. He's using the Force. He's not tired anymore after using the Force. And you can tell he's just a lot smarter. And now that he has some, Beskar chainmail and a big circle Mudhorn Clan of 2 piece on his chest now, he's probably going to be, tanked up within, 30 years after the Mandoverse. So, or no, even more than that. So I think seeing Grogu with Rey would actually be a really good thing, and it would help Rey's, movie, is if we have Grogu in it. Maybe that's what they're setting up for.
That's kind of why I thought about it as well, because it's going to be 40 odd years after what's happened in The Mandalorian. Din himself, if he's still alive at that point, is going to be pushing 70s, maybe even 80s, as a character. So his time would probably come to an end. And people are going to want to see Grogu after the scenarios as well. And let's not put it any other way as well. It would be a money spinner to have Grogu showing up in this film.
Oh yeah.
So it would not surprise me at all if he was a part of this. And they obviously something they keep very secret, even up into like the premiere of the film itself. You don't know he's going to be in it until you go and watch it, which to me is something that we get so little of nowadays. In terms of the surprises, because there's always leaks, there's always pictures taken on set and stuff like that. So I know that they did, the Mandalorian themselves have done very well with that in terms of they kept Grogu a secret going to the end of episode 1 of The Mandalorian, in the same way that they kept Luke's appearance at the end of season 2 a massive secret. So let's hope we do get to see them in the future. I'm really excited for the future of The Mandalorian itself. I know that we've had 3 or 4 seasons now, and his story is going to be coming probably to an end soon. But I think he's going to have a good legacy within the Star Wars universe itself and with the Star Wars fandom. So number 3 on your all-time list, that's a great choice. I love that. But let's get into Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Came out in 1999, the long-awaited prequels, when everyone's been wondering what the hell the Clone Wars were after the mention in the original trilogy, what happened with, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin's fall to the dark side, everything that we wanted to see in the prequels. We're going to be chatting about this over these 3 episodes, but we'll start at the very beginning. Episode 1, I know that you were extremely young when it came out, but tell us about the first time you ever really got to see it and what you feel about this film in general, now as an adult.
Yeah, that was, like I said, that's the first movie I saw and like remembered, and that was like the precursor of Star Wars for me. And I think it's really cool, growing up and understanding politics more, especially in our world here. You kind of look at episode 1 as the, it's basically world politics, but in a galaxy. And we get to really see that. And it really shows what the Jedi were, especially if you see the original trilogy. You're like, well, how was the Jedi, and, what made sense of it? And especially seeing Obi-Wan, we get to go back and explore the youth days of Obi-Wan, who his master was. And that's the thing, is that the time jump back to episode 1 is actually a really good place to start, in my opinion. I think it was when George spent all those years writing, I think the Phantom Menace was actually a good start. And the Phantom Menace, I feel, of the prequel trilogy gets a lot of hate. And I think it's a really good, step forward to paint the picture leading up to Attack of the Clones, and then the Clone Wars, and then into Revenge of the Sith. And of course, what Star Wars is all about, Anakin Skywalker, we get to see him as a young child. And, even dating back to the original trilogy, Darth Vader, we get to see Darth Vader as a kid, and some of the things we see even in episode 1 alone are the things that shape Anakin to what he's going to be. So that's, those are some of my early memories of it, and kind of seeing it nowadays, it's really awesome. I got the chance to rewatch it again before coming on the show, and it always ages well. It gets better every time you watch it.
I think it's just one of those natural things. I think the prequels did get a lot of hate. People were like, it's not very good. I generally think that episode 2 is still by a lot of people considered to maybe the worst Star Wars film of the Skywalker saga. So it's probably only natural that so many people that watched these films growing up appreciate them more as an adult than maybe the people that were there for the original trilogy did. I always hate the fact when I see in different Star Wars fandoms that there's a rivalry between original trilogy lovers and prequel lovers, because they're like, oh, the original's the best. Yeah, there's no faults in them, and then you got all the crap that was wrong with the prequels. I see that in some of the vintage Star Wars groups I'm in, when they are more heavily on the original trilogy. And then you've got people like ourselves that grew up watching these either as very young children or as teenagers, and we have a lot more love for them. I've always got to say for the prequels as well, when for a long time I always said Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, was my favourite all-time Star Wars film. And it's slowly been overtaken, and it took me a long time to admit it. I don't know why, but then Revenge of the Sith is now top of that list, and I don't think I'm ever going to be able to displace that. And it just shows, I think, for our maybe generation growing up with these films, the impact that they do have on us. That, I mean, Empire Strikes Back is classically one of the best sci-fi films of all time. It's always been in that top 3 list, I think. And then for people like us to come along and go, I prefer Revenge of the Sith, just kind of, I think, speaks to not only the quality that we think the film has, but the storyline in general and the build-up of everything going to that moment, because you had 3 films of Darth Vader in the original trilogy, and then get you back to see how that story then, how he got to that point, and the build-up to it, is then makes all the prequel trilogies a lot more emotional.
Yes.
Something I wanted to ask you actually is, if someone comes to you and goes, I've never watched Star Wars, where do I start in terms of the watching the films? Do you recommend doing it in release order, so original trilogy first, then go to the prequels? Or do you say do it in episode order? Or what perhaps is my favourite, because I think it gives it a bit more emotional weight, is, I don't know if you've heard of something called the Machete order. So the Machete order is where you watch episodes... you watch episode 4, then you go and watch episode 1, then you watch episode 5, then you go and watch episodes 2 and 3, and then you go and watch episode 6. So the whole thing about, so you don't watch basically the prequels first because you don't want the surprise spoil of Darth Vader being Luke's dad revealed or spoiled, because we obviously know in episode 3 he becomes Darth Vader, he has the kids, they're taken away from him. So if you watch it in a different order, in terms of you go episode 4, episode 1, episode 5, so you still get that big reveal of who Darth Vader is. You then go back and watch episodes 2 and 3 of him falling in love with Padme, them getting together, his fall, getting married, his fall to the dark side, and then having kids at the end of it, and then watching episode 6 to see how it all finishes. It's just throws the emotionalness around a bit, and you still, as a new fan who doesn't know anything about it, gets to experience it in a different way.
Oh, wow. See, that's very, very interesting. I've never heard about that. Man, even me just thinking about, obviously we know what happens, and it's just to think back of just the quick events from each of the films. That's, man, just even thinking about it, you're up and down. That's a crazy order.
It just seems to maybe hit all the spots emotionally where you get nothing spoiled, and then you still get to see how it all happens and get it all with you. And then, I think to me it's a crazy order to maybe do it in, because nothing's coherent really in terms of in terms of prequels or original trilogy. But I think doing it as that is almost like flashback ways. It kind of works really in terms of hitting those emotional points. But episode 1, obviously, we get Kid Anakin, Obi-Wan as a very young man, obviously about 25 in this film or something like that. Obviously, Qui-Gon, I can't even remember how old Padme's supposed to be in this film. I think I always got it wrong that she was supposed to be like 17 or something. But I think she's supposed to be like 13 or 14, isn't she, in this
Yeah,
film?
I think 15 or something. 14,
Um,
15, 16.
so mid teenager years. The
Yeah.
youngest ruler that Padme's ever had. Sorry, that Naboo's ever had.
Hmm.
Obviously, Jar Jar coming in. Even with Palpatine himself being a senator of Naboo at the time, revealed there, and then his obviously promotion at the end of the film. But who are your standout characters in this film? Because I think a lot of Episode 1 characters do get hate, and not just talking about Jar Jar. I think people weren't too keen on Padme in this. They weren't. I've even heard a lot of people say they weren't too keen on an Episode 1 Kenobi.
Mm.
In this film, doesn't maybe come across the best, but he's still a young man. He's still learning. But
Yeah.
compared to where we see
Yeah.
the fact that he's a 25-year-old Padawan still, and the way that he turns out, could he have been a bit more progressed at this point? What are your thoughts on these standout characters of this film?
Yeah. I've already talked about Maul. We know how Maul is and know how he ends up, and I think that's just great for his character. I'm glad he just didn't fall down and that was it. So, but if we're to talk more, Obi-Wan, I think it's really, really cool that we get to see, him, especially with Anakin during the Clone Wars and Episode 3 and 2 as well, how he tolerates Anakin and like his behavior, because Obi-Wan was almost the same way, but he was just there younger at the, Jedi Temple. He was there a lot younger than Anakin was. So, seeing Obi-Wan kind of being the old wise man, the strongest Jedi, and, taking out Darth Vader, multiple times and then giving himself up. It shows how, Obi-Wan wasn't perfect, how we've seen him. He started off very, flawed, and the way he starts from the beginning of the movie to the end, defeating Maul, and the emotional wake that we get to see with him, and how he reacts to Qui-Gon dying, and then having to just get a kid at 9 years old learning the ways of the Force just thrown onto him. That's Obi-Wan is definitely, like I've even told you before, Obi-Wan's my favorite Jedi, but it's the way Episode 1 portrays Obi-Wan is awesome. I love how he, interacts with Qui-Gon and his master, and Qui-Gon's another underrated character in my opinion as well.
Well, let's talk about Qui-Gon. His role in this film is that of someone who seems obviously experienced in the Force. He's very mindful of how to use the Force around him, and how to tap into those sort of abilities. But he's also someone that's very centered, and it's always said that the battle at the end, obviously between himself, Maul, and Obi-Wan, the music is called Duel of the Fates because it's literally deciding the future of Anakin. And it's always said that that if he would have survived that fight and been the one to have raised and taught Anakin, Anakin never would have fallen to the dark side. And he was actually one of the few people that that Palpatine feared because of how he saw the Force and how he used it to his advantage.
Yeah.
He was always obviously at odds with the Council. It's obviously Kenobi says to him, "You would be on the Council if you just obeyed them," and he was more like. I can't remember what they're called now, to be fair, but they was it the Seekers of the Jedi, the ones that don't necessarily, they're part of the Jedi Order, but they don't follow the Jedi rules, and they just go out and listen to the Force and do their own thing essentially. He's always been portrayed as someone like that, even though he does take orders from the Council, but he's in between those sort of people, the normal Jedi that take the orders from the Council, and the Seekers, if they were called that, who go out and just listen to the Force. So, what are your thoughts on Qui-Gon overall?
See, and that's really cool that you point that out, because he was pretty much in between. He saw the good in, the Jedi, but then he also saw the things that didn't really make too much sense. But I think that's what makes Qui-Gon such an interesting character, is because he's seen past the Jedi Council. I feel like he was more wise and was just kind of underused, not just from a fan watching the movies, not an underused character, but an underused ally. Yoda could have, succeeded a lot more. Like, and what if Qui-Gon was alive during the Clone Wars? Even, things would just be completely flipped. And I do love, though, in Tales of the Jedi, we get to see a young Qui-Gon, and
Yeah.
even Count Dooku's, you could see his triggers and falls to the dark side, and Qui-Gon could like see that and was kind of like, what's going on? Like, that's not you. And even at a young age for Qui-Gon, just very wise, very special to the Star Wars franchise. And we only get to see him, for a little bit. It's just, I think Qui-Gon is a very, very underrated character.
And what about his ability to stand up to the council? Because we get to see that as well when he's found young Anakin. He brings him to Coruscant. He puts them in front of them, and the council like this weird rule they have about we're not teaching him because he's too old. And he stands up to him and he's like, "I will teach him. I've done all I can with Obi-Wan. He's really at that stage where he should be branching out. So he's like, I will take this boy on, and it's what needs to be done because he is the prophesized chosen one." And the council, like they seem to do with so many of the other Jedi who aren't on the council, kind of look down on him a little bit. I love the fact that you stood up to the council. What about you?
Oh yeah, I mean, we see Yoda as kind of like a hermit, and he's kind of weird and goofy in episode 5, and especially we get to see how Yoda was and how such of a grand master he was. And Qui-Gon, like you said, steps up to him and is like, "I'm doing this," and it's just like, whoa, like, you know who you're talking to. But that's the thing, Qui-Gon knew his worth and knew what he could do. And especially, with Obi-Wan taking out Maul, he was more than ready for the trials. And Anakin was, like they said, he had a higher midichlorian count than even Master Yoda. I thought that was a really good touch to the story too. And I mean, imagine what Anakin, on top of him being Anakin Skywalker already, the strongest and the prophesized chosen one. Imagine his learnings from Qui-Gon, what he could have, what more he could have been. It's just a lot, man. Just a great episode. The more I think about it, it's great, man. It's beautiful.
It's part of what makes me hate the council a little bit because they just look down on everyone that doesn't agree with them, and they even that bit at the end after they've had the funeral or just before they have the funeral when Obi-Wan and Yoda are talking, and Kenobi's like, "I will train the boy. I promised Qui-Gon that I would do." And Yoda's kind of scoffing, going, need his defiance in you. You do not. He's like, you don't need to be the same as Qui-Gon. He disobeyed us too many times. And I'm like, the dude was right, though. That's like, you still can't see it. You reluctantly allow Kenobi to train Anakin, simply probably because he defeated a Sith and you thought, we can handle it, sort of thing. But at the end, Qui-Gon was right, and they still didn't believe him. And it really grinds me a little bit that the council pissed me off in the prequels. I'm not going to lie. Let's leave that be for now because I'll go on a rant otherwise about how much the council really fricked me off a little bit in the. But let's talk about a young Anakin. So obviously we meet him on Tatooine. He's a slave, him and his mum, and the whole thing about there was no father. He was birthed by the Force. I know I talked to you briefly about the fact that the Darth Plagueis novel that is now Legends. It's not canon anymore, so to speak, but it serves as almost like a perfect prequel to Episode 1. And in there it describes how Plagueis and Palpatine basically spent nights upon nights trying to submit the will of the galaxy to the dark side, and eventually they managed to do that. And then they felt like a shatter through the Force, and they knew that the Force was retaliating. And it seems to be the fact that the Force itself gave life to Anakin by impregnating his mum was basically the Force, because they felt the balance of the Force tipped towards the dark side by what they were doing, and the Force retaliated by impregnating Shmi with the Chosen One.
Wow.
And so therefore, this is literally like a prophecy coming true. And whilst I know the Sith had their own prophecy about the Chosen One, Palpatine loved to believe it was him, so to speak, because he was the one that brought down the Jedi Order and everything. But that's, I think, his arrogance more than anything else. But the Force retaliating by creating the Chosen One to bring balance to the Force. And I know it's been debated many times, what does bringing balance to the Force actually mean? Because some people take it literally in terms of numbers. They're like, oh, well, everything that happened, they did get it down to 2 Sith and 2 Jedi or whatever, and whether it was more just... Because you can't have one without the other, can you, when it comes to bringing balance? Like, the whole point of balance is that both sides exist, but in equal parts to balance each other out.
Right.
So this is why there always has to be some good people and some bad people, because that's just the way things are. But we meet the young Anakin anyway, so I'm getting sidetracked in my Force lore again. But we meet the young Anakin. He's obviously got this, high midichlorian count. And it turns out he's obviously a fantastic pod racer at 9 years old. Did you enjoy the pod race in the pod racing scenes in this film?
Well, when I was a kid, I always loved watching the lightsaber duels, so I would fast forward through everything just to that and then shut it off. But then, once you get older and get kind of tired of the fights, so you're like, okay, what else is in here? But yeah, the pod race, it drags out for a while, but it also just shows, like Anakin as a young child and his mom telling him she doesn't like that he's doing this, but he actually gets the chance to do it. And you can see that he, used the Force and trusted himself. And it's a good callback to Luke, in his X-Wing back in A New Hope. All the ties in. It's really good. I do love the pod race scene. I think it's really cool. We get to see Jabba the Hutt again, Bib Fortuna at his side. We get to see a lot more species. And we get to see, the Boonta Eve classic is a huge, thing on Tatooine. And I like how they showed that back in Mando season 3 with Pelimoto and everything was going on during the Boonta Eve classic. And what I really like is we're getting a Lego diorama set of the Boonta Eve pod race. So I'm excited to see what that looks like coming this year. So that'll be awesome.
Nice. I've been distracted by the fact that there's obviously a Lego Venator destroyer out there. I was in the Lego store in the city next to me last weekend, and I was just stood there for ages just looking at this built Lego Venator going, I fucking need that in my life, but it's so goddamn expensive.
Yeah.
But young Anakin as well, we obviously learn in this film that he's the one that actually built C-3PO. Which what always makes me laugh is that one of C-3PO's phrases that he's well known for is when he says "thank the maker" quite a lot. And after this episode, it gave new meaning for me every time he says that now, because you're like, oh, he's just thanking some imaginative deity or the factory that maybe built him, and you're like, no, Anakin's the one that every time he says "thank the maker," he's thanking Anakin. C-3PO being introduced in this film, and the way we first see him as well, obviously completely with just all the wires exposed and everything. How did you feel about this? This, I guess it was obviously quite a big thing at the time that Anakin was the one that built C-3PO.
Yeah, and that's awesome. There's a lot of, I love how we get the aspect of like Leia saying, don't underestimate the droid. And then of course Kenobi is like, oh, droids. And, so you it makes up like if you like droids or not. And I think it's really cool. C-3PO is a huge part of the original trilogy, and we get to see, him just basically scrap metal in Phantom Menace and what his purpose was going to be, for Anakin's mom and, to help them around the house. And he was 9 at the time, but you got to think how long C-3PO took to build. So, he could have been the age of like 6, 7, or 8, building a protocol droid that's, fluent in 6 million languages. Like that's even something more to, dive deep into. But, I love C-3PO and I love his character. I'm glad we got to see him in Ahsoka too. I'm glad that, Disney handling Lucasfilm now can see that even a character, such as C-3PO coming to live action in a, sort of a newer filled line of movies and TV shows in the Star Wars universe can serve as fan service for, a lot of us fans. So I think, yeah, C-3PO, he's definitely up there in the tier list of Star Wars characters.
Just whilst we're mentioning droids quickly, obviously we're introduced to the other half of that famous team in this film as well. It's again maybe a surprise origin for some that he actually comes from Naboo, and he was built to obviously service the royal starships. Obviously, our good boy R2D2, one of my favourite all-time characters. I think he still just about sticks above Chopper for me in my favourite all-time Star Wars droids.
Yeah.
Chopper comes in a very close second. But yeah, our boy R2D2, obviously we knew he was going to be in this film. But the way he's introduced, I think, was quite cool, and the fact that they're trying to escape Naboo, and all the other astromechs get blown up as he's there going away. And he's just beeping, going, "Holy crap! I better fix this quickly." Fixes it and gets inside, and he's then obviously accompanies them for the rest of the film. Just a quick word about R2 for this film.
Man, it's R2 is. Some of those astromech droids, you can't understand what they're saying, but you can at the same time. It's just the fluence in their beeping. You can understand, what they're saying. So you get to see their sass, and especially Chopper, like we were saying, that's the sassiest one. He's definitely has a personality, but R2 is the OG astromech, and gotta love the character. I can't. If my dad and I talk Star Wars, every single time, 20 minutes into talking, he always brings up, we need an R2 movie, we got to show how he was built, and, kind of get to talking and then thinking like, well, maybe that could be like in an animated series, a little quick, maybe we get Tales of the Droids or something, get a little animated piece on that, but gotta love R2. Gotta love him.
Because I think originally as well, when the original trilogy came out, it was supposed to have been told from the whole story was supposed to have been told from the point of view of the wills of the Force. But I know that George Lucas moved that on, and he originally said that before he went into the prequels or anything else, after Episode 6, he came out and said that this whole trilogy is being told from the point of R2D2 about 30 years in the future. He's telling future generations the legend of these people in the original trilogy. It was just nice to think that, like, as we know, obviously seen now with the sequels, obviously is lived through all of this. But the fact that he was originally the one that was there in the future, telling future generations about all these legendaries, and to me, he's actually one of the saviors of the entire saga.
Oh yeah.
So much. I know you can almost at any point you could say if a certain character hadn't done this, then the whole thing would have gone to pot. But R2 is there in every single film to save somebody's arse every single time. That is so important to the story. Yes. He is literally almost the savior of the entire saga.
I love. I saw an Instagram post a couple of years ago, and it was when they got to Mustafar and Anakin or R2 was following him and then he said, "Stay with the ship." And you never see R2 leave, Luke's X-Wing and not follow him. And then, of course, we get to see it in Mandalorian season 2, like when Luke takes out all the dark troopers. And then, obviously he's going through the hallway alone, but then who shows up, like 2 seconds later? R2, so R2 learned from those things, maybe he kind of feels some guilt, if he would have went with Anakin, could have told him, this is not what needs to be happening right now. This is not you, but he's always there on, Luke's side. And I think that's really awesome. You got to love the character. It's hard to not like him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of the best for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Padme in this film. Perhaps, I think this is one of the only characters I debate if the casting was maybe the best for this particular character. I know that she's quite young when she did this. I think that's maybe where I get confused about the age. I think maybe the actress herself was only 18 or 19 or something when she did this. The only other big film that she'd ever been in was Mars Attacks before this, which classic film in its own right. But she's obviously playing young people. I do at times feel her performances maybe a little bit wooden in this film.
Yeah,
but again, I think that's maybe down to the way they want to play this queen that's, always in these elaborate dresses and headsets and makeup, and has to appear very stoic especially since they're being attacked and the population are being killed, and that's maybe the first time they've gone through this in a long time, and so she's trying to not be emotional and be stoic for to stand up to it. What do you feel about Padme in this film?
Yeah, I think wooden's a really good way to put it. She's
Mm.
just kind of it's more of like a still performance. Um, because obviously, if you kind of think back to the original trilogies and you're looking at episode one for the first time, you're kind of like, well, who is this character? And then you can start kind of getting an idea, like, oh, this is, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see that Anakin and Padme are kind of forming this connection together, as younger children, and kind of put it together that she's going to be set up for a bigger
Mm.
character. And then especially when you find out that she's actually the Queen of Naboo, and at her young age, you kind of get some of the acting. Like you said, maybe they kind of did that on purpose to feel her character out more. I do like Padme a lot more in episode 2 and 3,
Mm.
especially episode 2. I feel like her being older and um, pretty much more in line within politics. I think it's really cool to see her character then. But episode 1 is just kind of the start for her character,
Mm.
and I do love that we get to see her grow up. But when she was younger, the wooden performance, I feel like that's just a perfect way to put it.
Fair. And then let's move on to. I mean, although I do want to actually just touch, because I bring this up with a few people and people never realise it, is obviously we get the scene when she first meets Anakin in Watto's shop, and Anakin's like, "Are you an angel?" Which is obviously always a bit weird anyway. But it was the fact that he's like, "Oh, I heard the pilots talking about them on the about angels on the moon of, I can't remember the name of it now. I don't know if you can remember the line off the top of your head." He's like, "I hear the pilots talking about them on the moon of something or other."
Wow.
But then we get an episode in the Clone Wars where I think it's where Ahsoka and Padme and a couple of others get poisoned with the gas by the mad scientist guy on Naboo, and they have to go to this. They get trapped on that planet that's got all the automatic weapons in the atmosphere in space, and they're trying to escape. And they're all at a table, and they're like, "Oh, are there any moons on this planet?" And they were like, "Oh, just the angels." And turn around, and there's like an angel from the moon that Anakin mentioned in episode 1, and it really pisses me off, but they don't once give any reaction to Anakin to seeing this angel from this moon.
Man.
And I'm like, this guy was talking about it in episode 1. We're talking about it was Padme from there, and we don't get any reference or even a shot of Anakin looking surprised that he's finally got to see an angel from this moon. And that really pisses me off. Sorry, I had to mention it a little bit, but
Yeah, that is
it's
a good piece missing, man.
It's just such a moment that it would have been a really good little like Easter egg in there, a little nod to episode 1. But anyway, what do you feel about the fact that they were laying the groundwork in episode 1 for their future relationship, which 10 years on in episode 2 is absolutely fine, but they're sort of like wanting to already put this weird like romantic tension between a 14-year-old woman and a 9-year-old kid in this film. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the laws in England with you aren't too different from Americans. That doesn't fly, like in our world. But we know George, had Luke and Leia kissing in the original trilogy, and I know people back then were even like, "What is going on?" But that was more after the fact. I mean, this 14-year-old and a 9-year-old kind of weird. But at the same time, it's kind of, you have to know that their relationship is going to start up within the next movie at least. They're too young to make anything. It wouldn't pass as a movie if it was anything more than what it was. So I think the ground that they made for them to it serves its purpose. We get the point, but the more you think about it, you're kind of like, hey, what's going on here, George?
Creepy.
Yeah.
But I think the last big character before we maybe talk about some plot points of the film itself that I wanted to just get your thoughts on is Palpatine himself. This absolute mastermind genius that has been scheming for so long before we even get to this point to have again I refer to the novel of him and Plagueis, that, to be honest, the events towards the end of the novel run concurrently with episode 1. But this guy's been scheming for so long. He seems so innocent yet friendly, which is obviously what draws Padme to him, and he has her confidence as a mentor in a way. What are your thoughts on the introduction to a younger Palpatine before he sort of becomes Chancellor.
Man, it's so good. Think of the patience Palpatine has.
Mm.
Because as soon as he took down Plagueis that he was like, everything's mine, but he can't just come out and do that because the Jedi would have definitely taken him out. So knowing that he didn't have numbers or anything like that, or the strength to take on multiple and hundreds of Jedis, it's just, there's no way. But the way he just played it, and he's literally playing chess the whole time, waiting for the best move, taking the best move, and all of the times, like Maul, and you got to think, you do them dirty, they could easily, snitch on you, Maul, especially with the relationship Palpatine and Mother Talzin had, it was complete opposite. And Palpatine taking her son as his apprentice, and he got done dirty. All he had to say was anything to anyone, and Dooku, even of all people. And man, Palpatine, seeing a younger Palpatine in episode 1, it's just awesome to see his, political aspect. He's, just kind of like a normal being, he's from Naboo. I mean, how more original could it get? And his character, being the Sith Lord, behind enemy lines, like just this entire time quietly, but still making so much noise, beautifully written character. Love how he's portrayed in episode 1.
I mean, I'm going to get far more heavily into his character when we do episode 3, because, I mean, he is up there. He is one of my all-time favorites, simply because I think people still massively underestimate how genius this guy was with his planning and pulling everything off. He's constantly playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers, I think is one of the best phrases to use for him. And just seeing so far ahead of what everyone else. And insanely strong in the Force, one of the strongest Force users out there. This is a guy that disdained using lightsabers, yet was one of the most proficient Sith Lords to ever use them.
Oh man!
Yeah, he thought that they were tacky as hell. And like in episode 3, we get Kenobi saying that blasters are uncivilized. This is Palpatine thought similar about lightsabers. He thought they're crude weapons. He didn't really like using them, but that's not going to stop him keeping them at hand and absolutely destroying you if he ever needed to.
Oh yeah, and arguably has one of the best looking hilts.
Oh yeah,
it's the gold plate, and he barely uses it, and like a lot of stuff surrounds Palpatine in a really, really good way for fans.
But even in this film, when he predicts almost the outcome of the new leadership race, when he's obviously acting a bit humble, he's like, "Oh, I'm surprised to be nominated, but it's a surprise to be sure, but a good one." And he already knows, because he's got the gift of foresight in the Force, that he's going to be the one that really is going to get nominated, and how that's going to go for him anyway. But yeah, this guy's an absolute genius. I can't wait to talk about him a bit more, and because he's a bit more heavily involved in episode 3, which is why I'm going to wait till then to dive a bit more into him. But still, just laying the lines in front of him in this film for what's to come, and everything like that. And obviously that little bit of foreshadowing at the end with Qui-Gon's funeral, when you got Mace Windu and Yoda talking about the Sith is like, if this was a Sith warrior, talking about Maul, obviously, like always two there are, a master and apprentice, and then it just sort of siphons off to look at Sidious, with a bit of the music foreshadowing in the background as well of the Empire. Got a lot of love for Sidious in this film, or obviously Palpatine as he is. He's not really Sidious. Oh, we do see Sidious though, we don't, with the full cloak and everything. I felt like we never had enough Sidious. Really, we always got a lot of Palpatine and never enough Sidious. But yeah, so any other characters that you want to mention before we just chat about the plot in general? Mace Windu for the first time, perhaps?
Yeah, Mace Windu is awesome. I love seeing Samuel L. Jackson, and Jackie Brown. That's one of my favorite Samuel L. Jackson movies. And I actually just watched Pulp Fiction for the first time, surprisingly, like 2 months ago. And I was like, God, man, he's one of the greatest. I understand why he's in 120 different films or whatever the crazy number is. But yeah, I love his character. I always loved having his little toy lightsaber when I was a kid, only because he was the only purple one. But yeah, he had a good role, especially you can see some of the High Council in him. You really get to see that, he's up there with Yoda, not at the same level, but in council, he's, right there with him.
Nice. Anyone else of note that you want to mention before we move on?
I don't think so.
No, fair enough. Because we mentioned Jar Jar already, so that's why I didn't sort of bring him up again. Let's talk about the plot overall of this film then. So, super exciting because we've come off the back of the original trilogy. We finally get to see the Republic at its pomp and the Jedi Council and everything like that. Some people say that this film was maybe too political. In terms of the route that they went down with the trade union and the dispute and all that kind of stuff. But you kind of need that because we get that throwaway line in episode 4 of that, like, the Emperor has dissolved the Senate and they're no longer a problem. So I think we needed to see what the Senate was and how they went about things and how they've all become corrupt and just focusing on their own things and not the good of the Republic altogether. So. But then you move that obviously through with the story of Qui-Gon finding Anakin and freeing him from being a slave, and then the defiance of the Jedi Council in terms of that, going through to the Council also don't believe that the Sith have returned, even though we see that. Followed on to the ultimate showdown at the end of the invasion of Naboo. With the Gungans being the one that goes up against the droid army of the Trade Federation, and then following that to the big showdown of Maul, Kenobi, and Qui-Gon, and what comes from that. Overall, what stands out from this film for you in terms of this story?
I do like that they take that step way back to understand, like what did the Empire overcome technically, and we kind of get to see the beginning of that. And we're talking about kind of overrated or kind of annoying characters, and that you reminded me. I never did like Newt Gunray.
Yeah,
he was just so annoying, and it just seemed like he couldn't pull his own strings. It was basically just whatever Palpatine told him to do, and he's just like, oh, okay, I'll do that. And I like how they kind of get caught, and then at the beginning, or towards the end, but at the beginning, character like him being kind of the front face of the Trade Federation, and that opening scene, with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon going in there like, we're gonna sniff this out, and they make it out. And I think it's I think the plot points start from the opening scenes, and it just slowly just gets better throughout the film. The political aspect, I do get that because it is a lot of politics, and it's definitely an older movie. I think it is a good little precursor to the politics that we see in our day-to-day life. And I mean, I don't try to get too into the politics here on Earth, but it definitely gives you a hindsight to what has to happen for things to go further with order. So I think the plot points in this movie are very relatable to your everyday life. So, and obviously going to the Duel of the Fates, that's arguably one of the best choreographed lightsaber duels that we've ever gotten. And someone with natural raw talent like Ray Park, who played Darth Maul, him with the lightsaber, it makes everything so beautiful. A young Ewan McGregor, and the behind the scenes showing the lightsaber work, I think it's just so awesome. Even Liam Neeson, getting some good swings in and good defense mechanisms. It's original, and you can really tell that George wanted to wait for more technology to go ahead and just start this Jedi Order or the Jedi Council from before the Empire days, and the way lightsaber duels were actually portrayed, politics. I think this plot line is very underrated in the prequel trilogy, just because all the things we've said, from Palpatine, laying underneath everything to different. It's not just Sith and Jedi. We have the Trade Federation, what they're doing, everything leading up to the battle droids, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, but it's beautiful. It's a good plot point.
I will always remember, obviously, the lightsaber battle at the end. But after Qui-Gon gets stabbed and Kenobi comes through the shielding, and they have their battle. He has his battle with Maul. Sorry, the speed at which they go at to
Oh
me
man,
was incredible.
yes.
They were so fast. Because I even now when I watch it, I'm like, that is ridiculous speed to be able to, obviously, because we know that like sometimes they have to train for months to do some of these lightsaber battles in the prequels, and I think even the obviously Anakin Kenobi one in Episode 3, they took 9 months of training choreography to film that battle.
That's just
And
nuts.
here I've seen the behind the scenes footage. Although what I absolutely do love is the fact that they kept having to reshoot so many lightsaber scenes with with Kenobi because Ewan McGregor himself kept making the lightsaber noises when he's fighting. So I think it's become a well-known thing, and he's talked about it quite a few times that he's there and he's going, and George is like, cut, and he's like, can you not make the noise? And then he did the exact same thing again in the next take, and they're like, okay, can you not make the noise? And he just kept doing it every time.
We're gonna start docking your pay, Ewan.
Yeah,
That's
it
so
was
funny.
always did make me laugh, to be fair. I know you had a few plot points that you wanted to talk about and discuss with this film, so hit me with some of the things that stand out for you and that you wanted to discuss and about this film.
So, something I really wanted to take a note of was that the Jedi completely thought the Sith were extinct, and especially at this point. And so when you see the original trilogy, and I like to mention the original trilogy a lot because just the order it came out. So you're kind of walking into this really expecting what's happening, but it throws the biggest curveball. So you don't really know what's going on too much within like the Sith lore. So when we get a character like Maul, we're like, whoa, this is not Darth Vader with a red lightsaber. This is a different person with a red lightsaber. And seeing, Emperor Palpatine being, just younger, and you already know who the character is, but you're like, how does this work out? And like, what's his first play? And I think it's just really cool to know that the Jedi just had no idea at all. And they came out of nowhere and then ultimately took out one of the most heavy, like the wisest Jedi in the council, in Qui-Gon, like we were talking about, just some character coming out of nowhere and taking out such a big character definitely sets up. And that's something definitely that after watching it a few times, you're like, wow, this is actually very, very impactful in the story, that the Jedi had no idea the Sith were still around.
I think what's also great is that, if my memory serves, the word Sith is never once mentioned in the original trilogy. They always talk about Master and Apprentice, obviously in Episode 6, the dark side of the Force. So this was really the first time we'd ever got given a name for what they were. The opposite of what the Jedi are, and it leads to more intrigue, doesn't it? Because you want to know then, okay, how many other Sith are out there? Did they have an order like the Jedi do? What was going on? And I know that we kind of base a lot of our lore now off of Knights of the Old Republic, because that is technically not quite canon yet, although it seems to be coming in some form or another in the near future. But for the fact that the first time we ever hear a Sith Lord is mentioned by Qui-Gon, he's like, I was attacked by someone who seems to be trained in the arts of a Sith. You're like, whoa, what the hell's a Sith?
Yeah,
that builds up that intrigue for it now, and the fact that they then mention at the end of the film that there's always two. That there are Master and Apprentice, and obviously we got the foreshadowing of Palpatine, as we mentioned earlier. But it's just the intrigue it gives you, doesn't it? Like, oh, cool, what the hell's a Sith? I need to know more about it. I've always been more of a fan of villains and anti-heroes than heroes.
Oh, yeah.
And so to me, it piqued my intrigue a lot more. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think that's what's really good about Star Wars, is because you watch a movie and it's just like, oh, yeah, the good guys always win. But obviously Revenge of the Sith, and we're going to save that for a future episode. Just, the good guys don't win. But even then, I think Star Wars is all point of view, because I've actually talked to some people who think like the Sith ways are more normal than the Jedi ways,
Oh, hell yeah.
taking kids, when they're young from their families, and, putting them through something that they have no choice for. Obviously, that's kind of weird. And, some fans, like even myself, I love Jedi, but when I really sit and think about what it is, it's like, man, this is kind of weird, So, I think that's something really cool within Star Wars is just the point of view. So I think that weighs very heavy, especially in Episode 1, because we get to see what happens, basically how it all starts.
And you're not wrong. I think the way that the Sith, obviously they channel their passion and their aggression and everything else, is far more natural than what the Jedi almost like. It's like basically essentially pushing your feelings down and bottling everything up and not really dealing with anything. It's just go, you should be spiritual enough like a monk or a Buddhist in a way to be able to push everything down and not have it cloud your judgment or your mind and just deal with everything as is. Whereas the Sith are like, no, you need to use all that to fuel you. And people do obviously in everyday life. They use their passion and their love and their hatred at almost at times as well to obviously motivate themselves and push them to do better in life.
Oh yeah,
it's just the fact that obviously that leads to selfishness and to as they always say, it's the easy way out of things, and that then the more that you use those emotions, the more you become wrapped up in the dark side. It then unfortunately takes over like a drug and then keeps you doing bad things, and you can never really escape it in the end. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know about you. I've always chatted to friends about if you would pick to be a Jedi or a Sith, who would you pick? And I'm like, I would be corrupted very, very easily to turn to the dark side. I would, and I'm not even sure I would last minutes in this. I would be gone in seconds in terms of choosing the dark side. I mean, I've got a Sith Empire tattoo.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I would be gone in so quickly. What about yourself?
Man, I love the Jedi just because they have cool lightsaber colors. I do love red. Red always looks really nice with a lightsaber. But that's just looks. I'm kind of 50-50, but I feel like I'd be more of a Jedi. It takes a lot to like make me upset or mad, so I'm more chill. So probably the Jedi. But at the same time, I've grew up playing sports, and some of the idols I looked up to, especially for basketball, were like Kobe Bryant, and he had that killer instinct. He used people talking crap to him or getting in his head. He's just like, screw that, I'm just gonna outplay you. So I mean, I see the both to it, but yeah, I'd probably be a Jedi.
Nice.
Just because I like blue. So I can't be a Sith with a blue lightsaber. I mean, unless you're Anakin, I mean,
well, yeah.
It happens.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm a very sarcastic person and quite emotional in my everyday life. So I definitely think if I can't use those and channel those, then I wouldn't make a very good Jedi. I certainly make him a good teacher because I'd be chastising them with sarcasm all the day long. So, absolutely. Anything else about this film? Any other things that come to mind when you think about it?
It's like I feel like we've kind of covered. It's just a good beginning to the unexpected, and there, I feel like a lot of fans kind of went into this knowing, what are we going to see, or more so like this is, we're going to see like a young Obi-Wan. I feel like that could have maybe been a surprise to most people, and especially seeing a young Anakin of the main character of the original trilogy and Darth Vader. But I think other than that, on the movie aspect, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know if you have seen the A New Hope big poster for, it's like a Funko. It's a huge theatrical poster, and then it has like a 4-inch Luke inside of it, and then it has a R2-D2 as well. But they're making a Phantom Menace one. And I was actually talking with Bailey about that on our episode we recorded for this week. And I'm not too sure when that's going to release, but I do know it was in the works. But that would be really awesome because I think the Phantom Menace has a really, really cool theatrical poster. So if they made that for as a collectible, that would definitely have to be in a lot of people's collections. Definitely would be in mine.
They definitely did have some good posters. The one that always sticks in my mind is Kid Anakin sort of standing in front of, I guess, what was Luke's home in almost episode 4, and the shadow reflecting back onto it, that looks like Vader.
Dude.
So just that foreshadowing of young Anakin turning to Vader was absolutely tremendous. It got so much press at the time, that poster as well. I saw it everywhere. It seemed to be like the main poster for the film in a way, along with like Darth Maul's face.
Yep. You got to use that face. You got to.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't really speak about him, to be fair. I know, like, there maybe isn't too much to speak about more, but in terms of not until later on in the way he develops in the Clone Wars and Rebels, to be fair, he turns into one of the greatest Star Wars characters of all time. But in Episode 1, he was almost, in a way, like a throwaway character. He was there to shock and surprise with his battle at the end. Like you said, that moment when the doors open up in Naboo and he's just standing there and he puts his head down and he pulls out his lightsaber, he lights up one side and the two Jedi opposite him light up their sabers, and then he just lights up the other side and they're like, oh crap. Sort of moment. And just seeing this acrobatic guy jumping around all over the place, which we'd never seen before again, because lightsaber battles we got in the original trilogy, which were few and far between, were more like almost traditional sword fights in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously the prequels went a very different direction with their lightsaber battles. But to see this exciting guy that was flipping around the place, we'll put the final thoughts on Maul, because I know that you love this guy overall. But for an Episode 1 Maul, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and with you saying he's a throwaway character, that kind of relates even to Palpatine. That's, it couldn't have been any other way. That's how he saw Maul, was just kind of as a throwaway character. I knew he knew that, Anakin was going to be the one that they're going to bring up and to take over as a Sith. And I think Maul definitely did justice for the first film. I know a lot of people love the first film for Maul. And I'm just very, very glad that we get to see and revisit that character later. Because I even remember as a kid, wishing there was more from him, because where did he go? Did he actually die? And knowing that he came back, it's really, really good. And then I think that just makes the Phantom Menace even better, is knowing that his character is still continued. And he didn't die ultimately. It's always good to know when a character didn't die. We get to see that with Boba Fett too. So maybe Mace Windu one day. But we'll leave that for later.
Final thing from you then. Where in the 11 Star Wars films we had, so let's include Rogue One and Solo in it just for the sake of all 11 films, where would you place the Phantom Menace for you personally in that list of 11 films?
I think it might be number 5 on my list.
Ooh, quite high.
Yeah, because it resonates with me a lot as a kid. Of course, you like a lot of things you do when you're a kid, and it also ages well as to an adult. There's some things you watch and you're like, how did I like that when I was younger? But I love Maul. I love Obi-Wan. You get to see his arc, just the beginning of his character arc, which is awesome. Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson did a wonderful job. Get to see a young Anakin. I mean, there's just so much that just plays into that being that high on my list. It's definitely one that is good as a rewatchable movie. So, yeah, I think that's a good spot right there, number 5.
I constantly reassess my list to be fair, where some films sit. Some of them don't change places. I'm not going to lie, Solo hits bottom of the list for me. I'm sorry, Solo, and anyone that loves that film, but that's never moving out of 11th spot for me. But Phantom Menace is one of those ones that slightly changes. Sometimes it's maybe sort of around maybe 8 or 9. Sometimes it can move up a couple of spots. I think the sequels throw a cog in where it sits, because some people love. It's obviously very divisive, the sequels. Some people really love The Force Awakens. Most people don't rate Rise of Skywalker very highly. And The Last Jedi is one that I think, depending on the person, switches around how high or low it sits, which, to me, it's maybe change where I rate The Phantom Menace, because I think there's some it definitely goes above. I think I was more of an advocate of The Last Jedi than most, because I looked deeper into maybe the story behind it rather than going, it's not my Luke Skywalker kind of thing about it. We'll get it's a rant for another time as well. But
Yeah.
I think I put it maybe a couple of spots lower than you. So sort of top tier of the middle films, I think for me is where it kind of sits.
Yeah, it's a
Simply
good
because
spot.
some of the others, I feel I kind of love the story a little bit more. Some of the acting in this, was maybe gets better as the sequels go on from certain characters. But yeah, I would happily sit it around 8th, 7th spot. I think is a good spot for me overall.
Oh yeah.
But I really appreciate you coming on to kick off my big Star Wars review of everything Star Wars, to be fair. And we're going to obviously be chatting a bit more episode 2 and episode 3 over the coming couple of months. So I really appreciate coming on. Loved having a chat about the Phantom Menace. Definitely one of the classics of Star Wars lore. But tell everyone at home where we can find your YouTube, where we can find your new podcast.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on again, man. It's always fun talking Star Wars with you. I feel like we're pretty similar on the scale of what we like and what we dislike. So it just makes the ranting and the conversation even a million times easier than trying just to explain things. So always love coming on here and talking with you, man. Appreciate you. But for anyone who wants to check out my channel, it's Clan Brandolorian on YouTube. And like we mentioned, we did just kick off a podcast of ourselves, and it is one of a longer one. And so we look at getting some guests on there. I look forward to having you on there soon, Andy.
Absolutely.
Talk some more Star Wars and, just keep pumping out new content. I have started a top 5 series on my YouTube channel as well, and I got some more ideas coming. And have already talked about lightsabers and ships, and these are all in my opinion. So if you don't like anything, just always comment on there. I try to get back to everyone I can. So, but yeah, pretty much anything Lego, anything Funko, of course, in the Star Wars universe, and some lore and some theories. I always address that, and just news with Star Wars. So, try to get a lot of the new things coming out because we are kind of in a dead spot right now, especially with the strike just ending for now. So we're going to see what we get for Star Wars, but I'm going to try to do my best to pump out some content for everybody who enjoys Star Wars. So yeah, anything Clan Brandolorian, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, that's where you'll find me. So pretty easy.
Absolutely. And obviously a link will be in the show notes, so you can find Clan Brandolorian really easily. Just go down to the description of the episode, click on that link, and you'll find them there. Obviously, you'll find my links to all my social media as well, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, which I've now managed to finally catch up and got all my episodes on. So you can go and view and see how ridiculous my early episodes are compared to how cool they are now. You'll find all that on the show notes as well. I'll be back with something new to discuss next week, and Clan Brandolorian will be back in the near future to discuss episode 2. So make sure you're definitely tuning in for that as we continue this travel through the prequel films and then on to the rest of Star Wars. But until next time, everyone, look after yourselves, and as always,
the Force will be with you always.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.